California's gold was no secret to the Californios, who, along with their native allies and enemies, formed a large majority of the population when the United States acquired the province in February 1848. This knowledge was already a generation old when they flocked to the San Feliciano Canyon in 1842. A year later, the agent of Yankee trader and Mexican citizen Don Abel Stearns deposited 18.34 ounces of placer gold from these mines in the U.S. Mint in Philadelphia. The sight of a glittering nugget, such as the one James Marshall noticed in the tail race of a sawmill he was building in January 1848, was nothing new, but Marshall's discovery started California's second bout with gold fever. Not much happened until May, when Samuel Brannan, a retired Mormon preacher and partner at a trading post in the former bunkhouse at Sutter's Fort, bought up every pick, shovel, and Indian basket he could find. Brannan was nobody's fool, but until that point his business had to rely on gold from the pockets of travelers wishing to cross the mountains with pack animals and barter. California banknotes, cattle hides worth about $1, served as his primary medium of exchange. Rumors about gold were already rampant, but the gold dust coming over his counter and a quick visit to the mines confirmed its existence. No one in San Francisco had paid much attention to the stories, but when Brannan charged up Montgomery Street on 10 May 1848, waving a bottle of gold dust in one hand, swinging his hat with the other, and shouting, "Gold! Gold! Gold from the American River!" everything changed. By the middle of June, the abandonment of San Francisco was complete, Brannan's newspaper announced. California's military governor, Colonel Richard Mason, set out for the goldfields in July 1848 to investigate the wild stories coming from the American River and see where most of his soldiers had gone. The stories were all true, he reported on his return to Monterey. The most remarkable part of it is that it is not exaggerated. 4,000 men were scattered along the river's South Fork, digging from 1 to 3 ounces of gold per day from the streams and gulches. One small ravine disgorged gold worth upward of $12,000. I could not have credited these reports had I not seen in the abundance of the precious metal evidence of their truth, Mason wrote. Even his officers could hardly credit the gold diggers' stories the colonel brought back. Lieutenant Edward Ord asked permission to go and see for himself, along with Captain A.J. Smith of the 1st Dragoons. On their way, they found farms and villages almost deserted. The officer in charge of the port of San Francisco had already collected $40,000 in duties, all paid in raw gold. The officers dined with 20 well-dressed, happy-looking civilians, who all downed 1 or more bottles of champagne, each worth 3 days of Ord's pay. Smith and Ord sailed for Sacramento with Sam Brannan, now well on his way to becoming California's first millionaire. They ascended the Sacramento River with some half-dozen runaway sailors and a grog shopkeeper or two to a landing, where half a dozen motley sets of vagabonds, whites, Indians, Negroes, Kanakas, Chinese, and Chilenos, greeted their launch. John Sutter helped the officers find horses. By sunset, they were riding toward the Mormon diggings along the American River. The next morning, they went to see the gold washers at work. At Mormon Island, named after the Mormon Battalion veterans who had made the first big strike, the officers found 300 men digging, panning, and rocking primitive cradles that produced 2 ounces per man for a morning's work. We looked on in wonder and astonishment for an hour, to see by what a simple process men were all around us getting rich, Ord wrote. Mormon families camped at every spring or patch of grass, perfectly contented with their luck. The officers spent the evening chatting about their prospects in the newly established city on the shores of the Salt Lake.